and I will worship you with all of my heart. I will worship you with all of my mind. I will worship you with all of my strength. You are my God.
Pray. Lord God, we thank you for this fall kickoff day. We thank you, Lord, for the great history of our church and for Tom, who's come with this wonderful presentation, showing us your faithfulness through all the generations. God, give us attentive ears and open hearts as we reflect. For many of us, it will be great memories of yesteryear. Lord God, we also pray that in the midst of this, we see what you're doing here and now and in the future of Village Church. We thank you, Lord, for all that are gathered here and those that will watch this recording for years to come as they learn about the saints who've gone before, the great ministry and mission of this church. We love you. We give you thanks and praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And can Tom turn off the lights, please? Well, welcome everybody. It's been a long time coming. I am healthy. That's the main good. I want to thank Dan for being here at like 5 in the morning to help me with this. Tom Smith and Pastor Pete for videotaping this for us. And Nancy Anderson for putting up with me and putting this all together. Publicity. We finally get to meet together. I'm really excited about this because my mother was one of the original charter members of the church back in 1950, and that's when I started here in 1950 on May 7th. So I'd like to share with you how we came to be, not only the church, but how we actually came to be where we are, where we live today. I'm really happy to have some honored guests here. My son Eric, my daughter Lori, her first husband Herb, and my lovely wife who trails behind me throughout my entire life. It's been great being in this class, and I wanted to share this with you for a long time. The song you're hearing in the background right now is a very special song. It's Arabic, and we were coming down a long, long hill on a bus into Jerusalem, and our bus driver played this song. We also heard the same song on the Sea of Galilee, and it's a very meaningful song to me, so this is what you hear here.
Go park here.
This is a 2-hour class, and we only got 1 hour, so I got to get going. Okay, Pete, are you videotaping now? Okay. Welcome to the 75th birthday celebration presentation. My name is Tom Rolfs. Today is Sunday, September 8th, 2024. This is being recorded in Beaverton, Oregon. This is an audio-visual presentation intended to permanently preserve the history of Village Baptist Church on the 75th anniversary. My mother, Dorothy Rolfs, was one of the original charter members. This one's for you, Mom. It is my hope that all in attendance will come away with a new awareness and appreciation of what took place here in 1949 and before. Some of you are going to be so overwhelmed with information you're going to want college credit. The year was 1949. Truman was president. Minimum wage was 50 cents an hour. Gas was 23 cents. Milk was 15 cents. You could get a stamp for 3 cents. A movie ticket was 35 cents. You could buy a Dodge Coronet car for $1,450. The average house price was about $7,500. The #1 song that year was Vaughn Monroe's Riders in the Sky. My brother was born in 1949. Now, we have to begin from the very beginning, and I have brought Eric, our son, here because he's going to fact check me on the fact that I'm correct on what he does. He's an expert on the Lake Missoula floods. Has anybody heard about the Lake Missoula floods? Yes. This is how we came to be. If you can picture yourself at the top of Skyline or top of Chehalis Pass or Bald Peak and look down upon this million acres of the Tualatin Plains, you would see 400 feet of water. That's like 50 stories high. So picture this whole basin, or fishbowl as you would, under 400 feet of water. How did this come to be? Well, some 15,000 years ago, we had a great flood, probably the second largest flood ever on the planet, next to Genesis. And so this flood was a backup of all the last ice age from the Canadian area on the border between what is now the United States and Canada. And when this thing broke loose, everything broke loose. There was as much water in this dam breaking as there would be probably in half of Lake Michigan. It was gigantic, catastrophic. And when it came roaring down through the states of Montana and Idaho and Washington, it brought all this rich topsoil, and it carved out everything you see. It came at 45 to 80 miles an hour. You can picture that. It's hard to imagine that it came down through the gorge, formed a gorge, came all the way into the Willamette Valley as far as Eugene. It also spilled over from Lake Oswego through what we now have as Canyon Road and filled this basin of 1 million acres up with 400 feet of water. It took 2 weeks to drain all of this water through the Gaston Gap on the way to McMinnville. We have these car-sized boulders that were driven all the way down here hundreds of miles. If you've gone through McMinnville, you've seen one there on the right side. These water torrents did dig everything out you see here. There could have been multiple lake bursts at this time. And maybe every 40, 50 years it would fill back up again and it would break loose and drive that down. So this is how we became to be, and this is why all the people from the east came here, because of the rich topsoil. This was called the Garden of Eden. It was paradise. This is where people wanted to be. Okay, here before us though were this Indian. I'm going to use the word Indian. I hope I don't offend anybody, but I can't say indigenous, so this is the word Indian, or the hostiles as they were called in the day. We have been given a wrong information about what the people were here before. We have a wrong, because we've only been told what we see on TV from Tom Mix, John Wayne, Hopalong Cassidy, Cisco Kid, Roy Rogers. All those TV shows gave us a false sense of what it was really like in those days. The Indians that were here first were called the Atfalatis. Now, the first explorers that came here, mainly Spanish people, couldn't pronounce Atfalati, and it came out Tualatin. And that's why we're called Tualatin in the Tualatin Plains. Now, if you came here in the 1800s, if you lived in Forest Grove, you lived in East Tualatin. If you live where we are sitting right now, it was called West Tualatin. Now, after the different tribes that were here were called the Kalapuya tribe. Very large tribe, maybe 19 different families, 19 different tribes, of which the Atfalati was one of those. They traded with the Colombian Indians, they traded with the coastal Indians, the Chillicothes, the Colombians, the Clackamas, the Multnomah Indians. And these were flathead Indians. In those days, it was a class thing to when your baby was born, you'd put a big piece of wood on their forehead, tie it real tight, and for 1 year, it would form their flat head. That's why we call them flatheads. If you go down to Astoria and cross the river there, the Chinooks were all flatheads also. Their problem with the explorers in those days is they were looking for beaver. Beaver was a very popular thing. Back east in Europe, these fur hats were very popular. And if you could find a beaver, you would have beaver hats. That's why it's Beaverton, and that's why Beaverton got its name. It's called Beaver Dam. But the contact with all these white people that came in here as explorers and trappers is we gave them diseases that they'd never heard of before. And there might have been 10,000 of these Kalapuya Indians in this region, in the Willamette area and here, and they were totally wiped out. By the time we settled here in the 1840s and 50s, there might have only been 60 left. And they were on this property which you're living on, that you're sitting on right now. In 1830, these fur traders came, trapping these beaver. Who else came here? Missionaries. I don't know if you remember the Manifest Destiny, but in 1493, Pope Alexander, I believe was his name, might have been Pope Alexander VI, he said that every white person had the right to take your property, your land, your island, whatever, if you were not a Christian. And so he allowed the Portuguese and the Spanish to go and raid, so to speak, islands and other countries. If you weren't a Christian, then you were ousted. Thus, the Indians in our part of the country, in North America, were ousted. Our government did a great job of trying to get rid of them. There were 60 million buffalo in North America. We cut it down to 1,000 to starve them out. village, there was a large village in Beaverton on Fano Creek. You know where Fano Creek is? That's the one that floods every year. And Augustus Fano was the first person to be there, but there was beaver all over this region, all over this basin. There were so many beaver that it plugged everything up, and there was just a marshland here, forested marshland. So when the first people came here in the 1840s, it was a marshland with a lot of forest, a lot of cougar, a lot of mountain lion, a lot of deer, and the Tualatin tribe. William Walker came here, and you know William Walker Road. He would help the Indians here. The Indians were friendly. They traded with us, they helped us. They weren't what everybody tells you they were. The Tualatin, they buried their tools, and they would move around to 24 different villages. And they owned this whole property, all the 1 million acres that we live on today. And they would just go from one camp to another. Their largest summer camp was at Fano Creek. Their largest winter camp was at Gaston, at Wapato Lake. As you drive through Gaston to go to McMinnville, on your left there was a gigantic lake that probably went from Forest Grove all the way to the end of Gaston there on the way out. And that's where also the Missoula flood would have taken the water and drained it out, which would have taken 2 weeks to drain that water. And it went all the way down to McMinnville and on out. So John Gaston came in and he wanted to build a railroad. So he drained Wapato Lake. And in doing that, the Tualatin Indians were, by our government, they were given an option. They could stay on a reservation there, or you're going to be gone. And the Indians were easily impressed by giving them certain things. And our government said, no, you can't have your place there, so we'll put you at a Grand Ronde where you can build a casino. And that's how we don't have anybody left around here. This was a lush floodplain. Everybody that was east of the Missouri River wanted to live where you're sitting right now. It's incredible that the end of the Oregon Trail was not at Oregon City, it was here. This is where people wanted to be. This was the richest farmland. They heard about all this rain and all this beautiful forest and a place to live and start over again. So, let's keep going here. These are the Tualatis that were left. There were only maybe 60 about here when William Walker ended up here. The mountain men came here and they just totally wiped out all the beaver, and when they trapped them out and they came for a independent lifestyle, Kit Carson and all those people that were all these first people that came here, John Fremont and Kit Carson actually developed the Oregon Trail in 1842 and 43. That's how the Oregon Trail really came to be. Kit Carson was a great guy, except he killed a lot of Indians. So it kind of depends on what period of time you're talking about of how things were in the day. But Kit Carson's one of the people that's kind of forgotten about who really mapped and platted the Oregon Trail that we have today, that we still have today. You can still drive a third of it. One of the reasons that people came here, though, was for free land. There was free land if you decided to make the trek over. And the United States ended at the Missouri River. There was only 32 states in 1841. So when you left and crossed the Missouri River, you left the United States and you went to the wilderness. And that was unplatted. People just didn't do that, except for the mountain men who came back and forth, told them about this rich farmland back here in the Oregon area. They left their family and friends. Who leaves their family and friends? It must have been some place that they wanted to go and start over again. You have people that were wanted by the law, they could escape that way. You had an 1837 depression, you had low crop prices, you had all these reasons for people that wanted to come out here. And so they tried to do that, but they banded together for security and safety in these wagons. And they would go to Independence, they would go to St. Joe, Council Bluffs. The Mormons went to Council Bluffs, they tried to come across here. They weren't very smart, they came in the wintertime, couldn't figure out that it snowed. And they lost a lot of people that way. But everybody tried to do that. 400,000 people decided to come out here to try this land. The dime novels were one of the reasons that people decided to come out here, because they heard these great stories that were they were sensationalizing what this area was like, but a lot of them believed that. Women for the first time could own land. The first time. That was a big deal. Half the people that came across the Oregon Trail, half of the women were pregnant. I don't know what they did besides play their fiddle, but half of them were pregnant. And so, and half of those babies died. When you came across the Oregon Trail, you had a 1 in 10 chance of dying. They say there was an average of 1 grave every 80 yards. Think about a football field. And we have 1 grave every 80 yards. But the free land, the pollution back east, the depression, bad prices, gold was an idea, silver was an idea. It was getting crowded in the east. All the people coming from Europe starting to get crowded. And you could sell your property for $500, and that's about what it cost to supply yourself when you got to independence. To buy a wagon, if you wanted to, you buy your oxen. It was expensive, but most of the people that came out here were middle class. They weren't poor, but it was a big adventure for them. If you could survive cholera in Kansas and Nebraska, you could make it. But most people died from gunshots, accidents, getting rolled over, having drownings. It wasn't the Indians. Indians was probably about the fifth thing. Only about 300 people died during the 20 years of the real Oregon Trail. There was hunters, cooks, wagon masters. Every morning at 4 a.m. a gunshot would go off or a trumpet blast would wake everybody up. By 7 o'clock you were off. And you averaged 15 miles a day. 15 miles per day. We have trouble going on a hike on Saturday mornings here. And some of the people wore out their shoes and end up barefoot. It was a terrible experience. It was dust. That's why the Oregon Trail was not in one particular line. It was many, many different lines because of the dust. Boredom, homesickness, those things would get to you. Water was a big problem. You always had to fill up with water when you found it. The Oregon Trail declined because of the railroad in 1869, of course. And when in 1861, we lost the forts. There were 7 forts where you could resupply. They would make it safer for you to cross, protect you, and you could resupply. And you had to take care of your wagons because if your wagon broke down, you were in trouble. That's how we got a lot of little towns, because when people broke down, that's where they ended up. And they would form a town there like Redmond, Oregon. The Oregon Trail declined because of the railroad, and then the soldiers that were at these forts, they couldn't protect the pioneers anymore because they went to the Civil War. So once they went to the Civil War, the forts were obsolete, and the Transcontinental Railroad was the reason for it. They wanted to go to Oregon City. Remember, there was no town from Independence to Oregon City. Think about that. You would see the horizon for days, and that would be kind of a disappointing thing. Now, this is what we've been taught in the past, the Conestoga wagons. You see all these all these movies, and they're all fake. They're not real. The Conestoga wagons were not used. The real wagons were 4 feet wide. You brought everything you owned on a wagon, filled it up with everything you owned, furniture, all your food, everything for 6 months. And it was 11 feet long. You could put this in the free throw line on a basketball court. And there were hundreds of these together. And if you could look down on these wagons with these big covers, the canvas covers, they were called prairie schooners because they looked like ships at sea. That's why they're called prairie schooners. And so you had to take care of these things. And you would put a milk cow, you'd drag a milk cow behind you, you'd have an extra oxen in case your oxen died, which they did. By the time you got here, you'd be having your cows pull you. It wasn't horses that pulled these wagons. Horses were not used. So when you watched Wagon Train on TV at 4 o'clock, they did not use horses. Horses ate oats. There was no oats along the Oregon Trail. There were no town to buy oats. You used oxen. My great-great-grandparents came here in 1851 being pulled by 4 oxen. And there were 4 people. So you had to bring enough food for 5 or 6 people. And many of the people pulled 2 wagons, had maybe 4 to 6 oxen. The people that had more money would have more wagons, and you would pull that behind you. You would put your milk, your fresh milk from the cow that morning, you'd take the cream off, put it in a barrel, put it on the side of the wagon. By the time you camped that night at sunset, you'd have butter. They'd survived this way, all the way along this route. It's incredible how they made it. I think it's the greatest migration, volunteer migration, in the history of man. Now, the problem is, if you weren't a white man, you were looked upon as somebody different. And these Indians were looked upon as somebody different. The Manifest said you could take their land whenever you wanted to, and too bad, we'll put you on reservations. There were so many reservations that were formed by our government that they formed the state of Idaho. That's how many reservations we have. The manufacturers that they bought the wagons from in Independence was called Studebaker. Studebaker made the wagons, and they were about $85 to $150. But most people brought their own wagons from their farms and then put the canvas covers on to keep out the rain and the dust. The dust was a big problem. And they usually slept underneath. They did not ride in the wagons. There was no room. There was no suspension system. It was noisy. It was bumpy. You would not ride in the wagon unless you were deathly sick. or maybe you're going to give birth, I don't know. But you walked. They walked 2,178 miles. 2,178 miles. And these are children, and these are women that are pregnant. And the women wore these dusters so they could gather up buffalo chips for their firewood that night. The kids their job was to pick up buffalo chips or wood for the fire that night. You had one boy that was assigned to every wagon to count the rear wagon rotations, and that's how they figured out how much mileage they went each day. And the average was 15 miles. A bad day would be 8 miles. The best day would be 20 miles. They used oxen and mules, not horses. So when you see these cowboy shows, they did not use horses until after the train came and we had towns and you could afford to buy oats for them. Because oxen ate everything. But the problem was you had so many wagon trains and so many wagons and so many oxen and mules that were eating all of the grassland that you had a tough time feeding. But oxen would eat anything. They pulled the wagons at 2 miles an hour. Now you all know that you cannot walk 4 or 5 miles an hour. It's just too fast. You have children and you have women also that could not walk. Oxen walked 2 miles an hour. They could only maybe go 15 miles a day, but they were pulling, they were dependable, they were cheap, they were trained easily. Mules were mules, and they were more expensive, and they ate more food than oxen. So oxen was the choice. 75% of all of the pulled wagons were pulled by oxen. So when you see a horse pulling a wagon, that was probably 1865. When you watch Wagon Train on TV, that was probably after the trains came. The oxen were also trained easily in 1 week. And what you will see in a real picture on the right here is you see a person that would stand to the left of the oxen and would say, gee, and what's the next one they held? Yes, left and right and whoa. That's what they learned quickly in 1 week. You could train oxen in 1 week. Very dependable. Also, you didn't have to put them with your wagons, so you could let them go roaming at night. You pick them up in the morning after you got that bugle call or the gunshot. And they could be picked up easily. They had a bell around their neck. And Indians did not want oxen. What do they want? Horses. So you don't want to have a horse for another reason, okay? You learn anything there? Now, this is Marlene Village in the circle here. This is where our church is. Can you see that okay? Okay, that's Marlene Village, where my brother and I were raised. And that was in the 1949. I've been sick. Okay, these are all of the free land homesteads that I was telling you about. If you were a single person crossing the Oregon Trail, you got 320 free acres. That was big. You didn't have that back east. You had a depression, you had low crops as far as taking your crops. Now, if you married or were married, you got to 640. It's 1 mile square. 1 mile of your own free. That was incredible. That's the reason they came. Not gold until later, but it was the free land and this mild climate and the forest and the rain. And you didn't have the bad winters. That's why they came. And Marlene Village was a great place because this was one of the summer camps of the Tualatin Indians. My brother and I found arrowheads right here in Cedar Mill Creek when we used to play down there. So it's true, they did have a camp here. And they would just migrate from each camp to all of their crops. The wapato, the potato, was their main crop. And that's why Wapato Lake was named Wapato Lake in Gaston as you go towards McMinnville. Now Lawrence and Lucy Hall, I have a picture of Lucy Hall here on the left. I don't have a picture of Lawrence, but they came over the Oregon Trail in 1845. Was founded, or Nancy Anderson. William, I'm sorry, I had to do that. That was on my original talk, so I had to go. William Walker had the largest home in the area. He had a 2-story home. It was right over here by where the Parks and Recreation building is. You know where that is, where the swimming pool is? That's where his big, huge ranch was. And he actually was really friendly with the Tualatin. He supplied berries for him. Captain Hall came here in '47. Captain Hall, I know you all have heard of Marcus Whitman. That was a terrible thing. And Joseph Meek, who was from Hillsborough area here, Joseph Meek's daughter was killed there in that massacre with the Whitmans. And Captain Hall and Lawrence Hall actually went up there to find those Indians They were the Umatillas and the Cayuse Indians, and they brought them back down here to Oregon City and hung 5 of them. Whether that was right or wrong, I don't know, but that's what happened in those days. Joseph and Mary lived in Marling Village. They didn't know it was Marling Village, and they built a cabin there in 1850. That became the very first schoolhouse. Very first schoolhouse is right someplace where we are right here, which is kind of neat to think about. The first teacher was Josiah, and they, of course, were living with the Tualatin at the time. Pastor William Cornell, you see Cornell on the right, he was a pastor. He was at Wesley Chapel, which is where Sunset High School is now. Then he went on to the Union Church, which is over here about a mile, which I'll talk about a little bit. And he was the pastor over there. And Cornell Road is named after him. And Skyline, which is there now, was Cornell Mountain. Hall Boulevard and Walker Road are all named after these famous pioneers from the 1840s. The grave sites of these people can be found at Union Cemetery. Dan Crawford and I were talking before class. Union Cemetery is a beautiful place. It's only a mile away. You just go past Sunset High School, take that first right at the light there, go about 300 yards. On the left is this beautiful cemetery with the pioneers that are buried here that I'm talking about. And I went to all these cemeteries to research this when I did all my studies. I used to be the volunteer for the Cedar Mill to keep all the things historical in the Cedar Mill. Here's Lucy Hall and their gravesite right there. Go there sometime on a Sunday drive. Portland was obviously founded, not refounded, but seen by Lewis and Clark. We all know that. It was a stopping place for the Indian canoes and for the Multnomas. That's where they hung out there. But Portland was actually founded in 1843 by William Overton. There's a street in Portland named Overton. He teamed with Asa Lovejoy. You've heard of Lovejoy. And they had a 640 land grant together that would have been somewhere between Jefferson Street and Washington Streets. Lovejoy sold his half to Francis Pettygrove, another street in Portland. In 1845, Lovejoy and Pettygrove flipped a penny to decide the name of this new area called Stumptown. Portland was called Stumptown because they cut all the trees down. It was also referred to as the village. Each of these people, Lovejoy and Pettygrove, were in Oregon City in a cabin, and they were going to flip a coin 3 different times and decide what the name of Stumptown was to be. Okay? Now Lovejoy was from Boston, Massachusetts, and Pettygrove was from Portland, Maine. Pettygrove won by heads coming up 3 times, or else we would be called the Boston Blazers or the Boston Rose Festival. 1850, we got the name of Portland, and then Portland was incorporated in 1851. Now, communities wanted to come to access the docks that were being built at that time. And I'll talk a little bit about that because Nancy would love it to hear about the fact that she lives right by Cedar Mill. A natural canyon provided the passage. Remember the big flood that came through here? That canyon road was formed by that. But it was a quagmire, nothing but a muddy mess. So the farmers that were out here, they couldn't go to Portland, or it would take many days to get there, and it was just a headache to go there. Now there was a creek there, and it still is a creek there called Tanner Creek. When I was growing up in the early 50s, you could see Tanner Creek because it was 40 feet lower than it is today. Tanner Creek emptied into Goose Hollow. You don't know where Goose Hollow is? Down by Suicide Bridge there. I've actually seen a person jump off the Suicide Bridge. That's why it's called Suicide Bridge. People don't survive. So at Goose Hollow there was a 50-foot lake, picture a 50-foot lake. And that lake went all the way to Chinatown. And the Multnomah tribe lived there. And there were geese there, Goose Hollow. So now you're learning something about that. Tanner Creek emptied into that, and it was called Cooch Lake. You've heard of Cooch Creek. The Oregonian owner at that time, the Weekly Oregonian, he financed it on the right side, a quarter-right road to go out here to this area. But he ran out of funds, and it only went up to where the zoo is today. So that's why it was an improvement, but still was very difficult to take your crops to Portland. In 1960, yes, I remember this, when they were building I-84, they took all the extra dirt and filled in Canyon Road 40 feet deep, or else because we had mudslides there every winter. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to show this to Penny Imlaw. This is the original penny that was flipped. that decided the name of our city. Impressed? Okay, here's Cedar Mill as it looked in 1940s. Sorry, Nancy. This is where Nancy lives. And this at the bottom, and if you ever, on a Sunday afternoon after it's rained, go to Cedar Mill Bible Church, and there's a walkway there, and there's a 38-foot waterfall there that is just gorgeous. You can't see it from Cornell, but I would encourage you to go there and see that falls. This is what it looks like. And it really overflows, and that goes from the pond. My brother and I used to go fishing and swimming in this pond, but you can't see it from Cornell. You actually have to drive in the parking lot, and to the left or the east is this waterfall. Now this house on the right is John Quincy Adams Young home. He came over the Oregon Trail. This is the house he built in 1859. Hold my calls. And in 1859, he lived on the second floor, and the first floor became the first post office in the area, and he was the postmaster. John Quincy Adams Young is one of our first inhabitants here. Now, this is a neat deal about Cedar Mill. Cedar Mill's not Cedar Mills, it's Cedar Mill. And the Cedar Mill that created all the lumber and all the planks in this area were used for the shingles of all the cabins that were being built in the Cedar Mill area. But the logs and the lumber was pulled by mules over Cornell Mountain down to Portland to the street NATO, and that's where our Portland waterfront was built, with that lumber from the Cedar Mill. It's a great story that nobody has ever told you before. Okay, now we have St. Anthony Church, which is right next door here, and I know Dale's here, right? Dale's here, yeah, Dale knows a little bit more about this probably than I do. He and I have the 77 names of the people buried there. I believe they're all Catholics. Don't hold it against them, but they're all Catholics, I believe. Now, the church was built in 1878. Now we had wandering reverends or wandering pastors in those days. There wasn't really always a pastor for a church, but Reverend William Verboort was the first pastor there. Now, the road that went by here was called Highland Park Road. It was a farm road. It became Murray Road and then Murray Boulevard. It was moved from the east side to the west side, and the cemetery was created that we see next door. And the school and convent had 75 students. The Murrays went, his boys and kids went there. 2 fires destroyed it 2 different times. And the final service was in 1916. And Owen Murray, what a character. Owen Murray came all the way around South America from New York, went to San Francisco for the gold rush, won and created and got he brought back a lot of money. He came to Portland up the coast. He settled out here where you know McDonald's is over here. He had a big, huge ranch, the most horses of anybody in the area. He buried his $90,000 in gold somewhere between McDonald's and the Sunset Highway. So when you don't have anything to do, take your metal detector out there, start looking, because I want to find that. Owen Murray was an unbelievable guy. Murray Boulevard is named after him. Now, the redwoods we have here are very interesting. Now, when we were kids here, there were a lot more redwood trees than bigger forests than there is today. But there's still redwoods next door. And they were planted by the sisters of that convent there that came from New Zealand. And those are the trees we still have here. It was sold to the village in 2005. This is the sign that was put up there after, I believe, Dan, this was the last time we cleaned out the cemetery. And there's the school right next door there. And actually that was, I think it's 1899. I can't see it very well. But Joseph Murray was one of his boys, and you find the Murray headstones there. This is where our story really begins. So I know you've been waiting with bated breath for this. But there are 3 people that God sent here. God had a plan, and you all know that things just don't happen. And there's 3 key individuals I want to cover a little bit about, and I want to bring them to your attention because I think we need to remember these people and what God did with these people. Fred McLean had a vision when he was a child. He lived in the rolling hills of North Carolina as a child. He had a dream, a vision one night. God spoke to him and says, I want you to go west. I want you to build me a community. I want you to build me a church. I want you to build me where people can come out there. They have to have a reason to come to the church. I want you to build this church. So that's where it really begins. So let's do a quick review of what it was like here in 1946 and 1949. Now, the first migration that I call the first voluntary migration was the Oregon Trail. Okay, obviously. Now, there's many more trails on the Oregon Trail. We have the Mormon Trail, we have the California Trail, all those things spread out. But it's the Oregon Trail. And you can drive most of that if you really want to, all the way back to Independence. You can drive and see the ruts and everything. You can just go to Baker, Oregon to see all that. But then we have another migration in the 30s, the Dust Bowl. That wasn't a voluntary one. Most of those people went to California. But we have a third migration, about 100 years after what I'm talking about. That's from Portland to where you're sitting here, out here. This is where this farmland was, and this was a great place for housing. This is where the suburbs were going to be. The word suburb wasn't even used until people started moving out to these communities. The third migration brought your relatives and my relatives out here. The Oregon Trail brought our great-great-grandparents out here. The little teeny town over here called Beaverton, which was called Beaver Dam, had 2,000 people. It was mainly a railroad stop. There was no Sunset Highway out here. You had to take Wolf Creek Highway from the Banks Cutoff to get to the beach. You had to go through Beaverton, Hillsboro, Banks, out Wolf Creek Highway to go to the beach. No Sunset Highway. Why would people come out here from Portland? There was no school, no neighborhoods, no shopping, no amenities, no service station or church in our area right here. So something had to happen. So Earl McLean had this vision. So in 1946, he bought this little farm here, right across from Rita Drive, right over here by the cemetery, across the street was a farmhouse. He bought this farm for $50. And that's where all this forested area was. I'm going to show you in a minute. This was across from the cemetery for $50. So he started to clear these large trees to put in. He was going to put in one community here, and one community here, and a church in the middle with a restaurant to bring people to the area, an apartment house, and all the amenities of shopping, a gas station, and a school. That was his vision he had when he was a child, so don't forget that. Okay. This is what Murray Road looked like onto what we become Sunset Highway. This is why people didn't come out here. This is turning left from Murray. This, I don't know if you, oops, sorry about that. I knew that was going to happen. Sorry about that, I just had a... Okay, if you take that upper right-hand corner, that would be Sunset Highway. This is 1946. Okay, this was the road. Nobody could come out here. I was introduced to this guy on the left. This is Earl McLean, the son of Fred McLean that had the vision. And he was 96 when I met him. I'm trying to think of it. I just had a brain cramp. The Al Fuller's Jr., who I just talked to 2 nights ago, who couldn't be here. He's the last living member or person that was here in 1949. He couldn't be here because of health reasons. I want him to do the closing prayer, but I'm thinking about him. But Earl McLean lived over here by Sunset High School. He was 96, and I was told to go talk to him because he knew everything about the area. I spent 2 years with him in his home. He was a tremendous Christian individual who sang to us. I never had met a person like this. One of the streets in McLean Village is named after him. I took that picture of him when I took him over there. He's standing right underneath the sign that says McLean Street. So I spent 2 years with him. He shared all of his memorabilia that you see on the right there. He showed me his home movies from the 1930s and 40s. And I actually used those videos and I put them together. And so I'm going to show you a short video that nobody else has. You're going to see for the very first time Al Fuller, the founder of our church, in the bottom part of the photo of the video. And you're going to see him in 1939 at the first church he founded called Dixie Mountain. That's our sister church. That's where we really came from, in Dixie Mountain. He founded 5 churches before he died an early death. And then you're going to see in 1946, the McLeans, Earl mainly, doing the cutting down of 6-foot wide fir trees is where McLean Village is across the street here. Then you're going to see the opening of Sunset Highway. Nobody has this footage. And this is very important because this gave us a Portland to the coast route, not just Wolf Creek. And you're going to see the first car that ever went from Portland to the coast. You're going to see Sunset Valley Elementary School that Penny and I and who else in here went to Sunset Valley? We went there for 8 years. You're going to see the 4-room school as it was built. So there's our school. You're going to see the building of the chuck wagon, which is now the Greek wagon over here. The chuck wagon was the center of everything. The school and the chuck wagon, that's where we spent our entire lives along with the church. That's where we lived. 1949, you're going to see the opening of the chuck wagon. You're going to see the gas station that's next door. You're going to see a muddy Murray Road. In 1949, you're going to see Frank Dobra and Al Fuller, and you're going to see a very young 12-year-old Al Fuller Jr. at the church site. You're going to see 12 seconds of the church being built. You're going to see Frank and Al Fuller at the top of the church building it, and you're going to see the baptistry at that time. And you're going to see Al Fuller Jr. walking towards the camera. So sit back and enjoy. You'll see Al Fuller at the bottom of your screen right there. This is right across the street. This is the grader he used to grade off the church that we are on right now. He graded it with that grader. Here's the Sunset Highway being opening. The governor of Oregon, I think it's Governor Hall, is giving a speech here. They're all dressed up in mountain men clothing. You'll see the car being the first car to allowed through. There's a Vernonia cut off and Banks cut off. There it is looking back towards Portland. There's the first car going through. Sunset Highway. Here's our grade school that was being built. At Union, there was a Union church and a Union school. They dragged the gymnasium from the Union School a mile, and that would be our gym and our cafeteria at Sunset Valley Grade School. You like that, Penny? Earl thinks they were singing the national anthem or America, he's not sure. But that's Murray Road right behind you there with Cornell in the distance. That would be where McDonald's is in the background there. Hillsborough photographer. This is what you call a new suburb. There's Murray Road right there, looking towards Cornell. There's the new gym they dragged over from Union. There's Fred McLean, who had the vision of all of this as a child in North Carolina. There's Fred McLean, you just saw Al Fuller in the background. Now there is McLean Village, where Dale Paulette lived. There's the chuck wagon, as was a grand opening. You'll recognize some of the homes in the background. Murray there, 1949. There's a 1947 Chrysler. I'm not sure who's in there. It had all kinds of different things, a dentist office, groceries, the apartment on top. There's Fred McLean. He was really into Western attire and Western. People would ride their horses there. We rode our bikes. We moved here in 1950. This was all in place. These are the two waitresses from the restaurant, which we would go and visit after school each day. We would walk across Sunset Highway. There's Sunset Valley Grade School in the background. There's a muddy Murray Road. Fred McLean had the vision, Frank and Alma Dalbrook. There's our church right there. You'll see Frank, they're building at the top here. They came every day from First Baptist Church. They had permission from First Baptist Church in Forest Grove to come and build this church, our church. Here comes Al Fuller Jr. that I just talked to 2 days ago. He's probably 90, but he's 12 years old here, and he helped the building each day. This is May of 1949. Here's the baptistry where I was baptized. Now, Sunset Highway was not named after the sunset. It was named after the Sunset, and Sunset High School and Sunset Highway were named after the 4th Infantry Division. If you go down to the beach on the right-hand side of Saddle Mountain, you look on the left side there, you'll see the sign. And so Sunset Highway and Sunset High School were named after this infantry division that was used in World War II and founded in World War I. Okay, now what do we really have so far? We have a highway, and we have McLean Village built, and we have all these shops, amenities, we have groceries, dentistry, grocery stores and things, a school, and a gas station, but still no church. So, what do we need to have a church? Well, Cedar Mill Park, which was called McLean Village, that's where Dale and Pastor Jensen lived. This was the first part of Fred McLean's vision of his town, with his church in the middle. So, these were upscale homes. The McLeans had this construction company. These were 3-bedroom homes. They had an attached garage. That was unusual in those days. You had oil heat, you had insulation. It was a nice home for $10,000 to $12,000. Okay? And then Al Fuller marries Alma McLean in 1933. So they're close, they're family. They moved to Hillsborough in 1938. They formed the McLean Construction Company. Commonwealth, which my wife worked when she was single before she got smart and married me, and Commonwealth is the one that financed it. These were upscale, and they were built, took 3 years to build these 88 homes called McLean Village. Fred and Al meet at the chuck wagon, and Fred turns to Al and says, First Baptist Church wants us to build a church. There's no Baptist church here. Will you be my man? And he said, I'm your man. And that's how Al Fuller became the founder of our church. So let's meet one of these early McLean Village settlers. Anything to say, Dale?
Wasn't quite that early though. That was 1961.
So here's what some of the village would have looked like. Here's McLean Village, upper left. Here's the chuck wagon just being finished in 49. It opened in May 7th. The shopping center, look at the bottom left. Can you see that? Okay, you can see the chuck wagon, you see the gas station, that's Murray Road. The restaurant's on the right there. Okay, my parents, my mother would always have my brother and me right up the long, steep hill to go to the chuck wagon to get bread or something. And my mother would give us a nickel, and I'd buy baseball cards as our reward. On the left here was the restaurant. It had these tractor seats that we'd fight for. After school, we would walk across Sunset Highway when we didn't have some sporting event going on, and we would buy a 5-cent graveyard or a 5-cent cherry Coke, and we would sit in those tractor seats. It was really neat. Now here's the menu. I actually have the menu from the chuck wagon, and you can see some of the prices. There's a milkshake over here. Milkshake was 25. No, 20. A malt shake was 25. But anyway, here's some of the prices, and so I had that there. Thought you'd enjoy that, but that's 1950. We went there. Now you have to realize, people, this was one of the reasons to get people to come out here. Remember, he had to try to find a way to get people to come out to this church that he built. And when he came out to this, we had to get people from Portland. We have a highway now, so there's no excuse. And we have a restaurant. This restaurant brought lots of people, besides people moving out here. And the church was supposed to be in the middle of McLean Village and Marlene Village. That was his dream that he had when he was a child. So, Al Fuller and Frank Dobra were given permission by the First Baptist Church in Forest Grove to work on a new church out here every Monday. And so they were excused from the church. Al Jr. spent each day helping the two of them as a 12-year-old. Now, in 1950, Billy Graham Crusade came here. Some of you may remember that. I was 5 years old, and my grandmother lived across from Fran's Bakery. And she walked me down to the 1950 Crusade. I don't know how many days I went. It was right across from Benson High School. And all I can remember was a big, huge tent with sawdust as the floor. That's all I can remember. But Al Fuller planned part of that with Billy Graham. It was across from Benson. He had part of the staff, and I believe the staff was Cliff Barrows and George Beverly Shea were asked to come out and have coffee and a hamburger at the Chuck Wagon. And Ken Glantz, who was here for many years, y'all remember Ken Glantz? Great guy. He was Billy Graham's bodyguard. And he was also his chauffeur and would take him each night back to the Multnomah Hotel in Portland. Now, isn't that kind of a nostalgic thing? And we miss Ken Glantz. Here they are again. This is at First Baptist Church in Forest Grove. Al Fuller would begin 5 churches before his untimely death in 1966. In 1904, the First Baptist Church in Forest Grove disbanded, and Al Fuller wanted to start that church back up again. So when he was in college, he wanted to do that. So he brought it back in 1944. He found this old mansion in Forest Grove, and he built a room adjacent to it, and that's what Forest Grove First Baptist Church on the bottom right looked like. And this is the inside of the church, and you see his family there at Christmas. So this is our founder of our church, and I wish we had a picture of him someplace in the church. And okay, 1944 he began the First Baptist Church. He was a great promoter. He took his old 1940-some Buick. He put a big speaker on his top of his car and drove all the way through all the country's area promoting Youth for Christ meetings and the meetings at the First Baptist Church. So he went out and recruited. He mentors Frank Dobra at the University of Oregon while they were attending. So Frank Dobra met him at Oregon. He was supposed to find a Cedar Mill church site, which he did. Now Clarence Nelson, we don't even hear about him. He was a logger, and he made his money logging. And Clarence Nelson was a friend of Al Fuller and Frank Dobra. They were all friends, all 3 of them. And so he gave, get this, in 1949, he loaned Al Fuller $10,000. I don't even know what that is in today, that you can just imagine. $10,000. The church paid him back in 3 years. At $12 a Sunday, I'm not sure how that happened. It's incredible. Okay, work begins in May 1949. You saw that. McLean and Marlene villages were on both sides. We have the church in the middle, like you visioned. But the church had no congregation. The church was a vacation Bible school. It was a kindergarten. It was a Sunday school. And then it held services thereafter. I have Alma Fuller's letters. I have 500 photos and the old documents and letters from Alma, which I have on my computer, and I have donated them to the church. Alma wrote many letters, and we have much of the information about the church. Unfortunately, custodians that have come along have thrown things away, but I've gathered everything. My mom kept everything. She was a hoarder. She's like my wife. She kept everything. Unbelievable. So we have Alma's letters, and Alma's the one that named our church. She named it the Village Baptist Church. The Village Baptist Church. Now there are over 5,100 First Baptist churches. You're going to not like me. First Baptist Church in the United States. Can you imagine taking out the word Baptist and we all have First Church? Get my drift? We are the First Baptist Church. It will always be First Baptist Church. His death was untimely. He was driving to a conference in Canby, and his son was driving, and they got T-boned, and he was tragically killed in it. Now, here we have Frank and Alma. We have 2 Almas, Alma Fuller and Alma Dobra, unusual, getting married just before the church was built. I took this picture of Frank. We became really good friends. I remember him as our lead pastor. I was only 5 and 6 and 7 years old, but I remember him because of his big nose, pronounced nose I should say, and his humped over style. But he and I became friends when I got out of Linfield College. I was the baseball coach at Hillsborough High School, and he showed up at my games, and he lived right behind the school, by the field. So he came to all of my games. He also helped Bonnie and me by sponsoring us to go to India. Thank you. His parents were born in Hungary. They didn't speak English. They were recruited to go to the Orenco Nursery. And Orenco stands for what? Anybody know what it stands for?
Oregon Nursery Company.
Oregon Nursery Company. Thank you, Dale. And his parents didn't speak English, and he wasn't born yet, of course. They moved back to Ohio, and he was born in 1924. They moved back here. They moved in this area here, Hillsborough. Al Fuller took him in, like I mentioned. They co-preached together. Al would teach like in the morning one Sunday, and then in the evening the next Sunday. They would flip-flop. They co-preached. They were both the lead pastors. Frank Dober went to Hillsborough High School. He was our first lead pastor for 2.5 years. We went to West Pakistan as our first full-time missionaries, served 5 terms, built a hospital when they went to East Africa, married for 65 years. I had the privilege of doing his 90th birthday, did a video for him there. Now this guy here on the left, Charles Bernard, in 1928, he built a little teeny airport right here, over here where Cedar Hills Boulevard is. And my brother and I used to ride our bikes over there and see how close the planes would come over our heads when they landed. They were World War I planes, biplanes. And we really enjoyed watching that. And he had this weird deal where he would charge admission to have horses pull gliders, and you would go 1,000 feet in the air. This was it. And anyway, 1924 was another airport. There were 2 airports over here, half a mile apart, by the way. And in 1928, the same year that Hillsborough Airport was built. And then the Bernard Mall was built there. So if you remember Bernard Mall and where the Sail Hills Crossing, that's where that airstrip was. And the reason I'm telling you all this is when Cedar Hills was built, Cedar Hills and Marlin Village, we kind of got scared because all these planes were flying over us, and Cedar Hills started to complain about the planes are too close to our homes. And so I had a friend named Ed Zerflo in 1955 who crashed his plane in Cedar Hills, and that was it. And so Bernard was told to move or get out of town, which he did, and then we had Bernard Mall that was his place. But that's how we got these planes. But in the next clip, you're going to see that my mother has the photos from Marlin Village. I have about 6 or 7 of them. I'm showing you 2 of Marlin Village, McLean Village, the church, and this area from a World War I biplane. Okay, let's look at that. Okay, I don't have my pointer, but I'll show you. If you look in the very middle, that's the Sunset Highway in 1952, 53, okay? If you look there, you see the sign says, nobody cares, but that sign there says Marlin Village. On the far right there, you see Sunset Valley Elementary. On the left, you see Nancy Anderson's farm. Is that about where you are? Someplace there.
I've been there somewhere.
Yeah, it's right there someplace. But anyway, if you look to the right, to the left, you see Murray that goes in front of the school. And on the right there is a chuck wagon with the little service station. And then on the right, you have 88 homes in the McLean Village. On the left would be Marlin Village. This is the opposite view. This is a church in the left-hand corner. Do you see that? And you see the redwoods that the sisters planted there. And you see the Cedar Mill creek right here. It takes a right angle turn here. That's why it probably flooded over. Plus it was full of debris and arrowheads. But that's why it flooded over. But if you look right here, there's a sewer. And we used to play at that sewer and ride that thing around and around and around. But you can see right here, all the church was a little teeny field here that we used to play in and gather snakes. And right to the left here was a stable. Well, we used to scare the girls. And there was a stable right here where we go to feed the horses right here. And the owner of this property to the left, what I'm trying to wiggle the arrow right there, was we bought that property eventually. And the owner of that, he was the bus driver and the custodian of the elementary school, and we just loved that guy. Okay, here's the kitchen being built. This is where our kindergarten was. And now it has the printer and machines back there, and that's the original church sign there. This is the document. It was December 27th, 1949. If you look at the bottom here, you can see that it has voted. The vote was 7-0 for us to become a church, and it was signed by Al Fuller on the right. And you can see the date there, December 27th, right in there. And that's the actual. And I had that, and I made a copy of that. Now this is a very interesting photo on the left because this is a very early service. You can see we have folding chairs. We borrowed the folding chairs and the piano from the grade school for a while. There's Al Fuller on the right. If you look real close, you can see on the wall that we took in $13.03 that Sunday in the offering. I don't know how we paid that $10,000 back. The next year we had pews. We thought we were living pretty high on the hog. New pews, we bought these from Ohio, an Ohio company for $700. That was pretty neat. Here's a picture of the church as it would have looked as we finished it. And this is the first service, and this is a very good picture because in the far left you see the doorway that goes in to where the kitchen is and where our kindergarten would have been. In the very middle there, you can see we're oh dang it, sorry. You see we're right here. Oh man, Dan Crawford, help me out. Okay, right here is where the food was, because we had all these events all the time. Everybody lived at the church and at the school. Everything that went on was the two places. In that picture is my mom someplace. Back here at the door was where you went to the restroom, and that would be where you went up the stairs eventually to the second story that we built about 6 years later. On the right you see the first grade class, the second grade class, the third grade class, and in that picture is Frank Dover's parents. This is the opposite view. Now you see the pastor study on the far left. There are about 60 people there. On the far right was another office, and the 6th grade, and the 5th grade, and the 4th grade classrooms had sliding doors on that side. So we had 3 classrooms over here, 3 classrooms over here. This is the second year of the kindergarten. Penny, are you here? Are you still awake? Okay.
I think I was much younger.
Yeah, you were. I'm still mad at Penny because I had the hots for her, but she liked my brother. Very disappointed. But this is the second year of kindergarten, and that's my favorite shirt. It probably was my only shirt. But we would actually sleep on the floor in our blanket for your nap, so the teachers didn't have anything to do. And we had milk cartons, of course, but we'd go out for recess in that field I told you and catch garter snakes and put them down the girls' backs, and we'd go feed the horses. And Chris Schindler's had these horses, and he'd let us pet them and ride them if we could. We'd play in the sewer, we'd collect these snakes, and we'd walk to and from home. But this is the second year, and I went to both years. I always asked my dad why I went to 2 years of kindergarten. He told me this was super kindergarten. I never believed him, but. And here's Frank and Alma, and when they went, they were assigned to West Pakistan. And West Pakistan is where their son Al Dobra was born. This are the big three. These are the 3 most important people of our church in the early days. They did everything. Okay, thank you. I've just been warned, my 2-minute warning. But these are the most important people in our church. I've got their names up here. Ruth Dover, I took this picture of her when she was 15. It's a Hillsborough High School yearbook picture. She was our very first Sunday school teacher at age 15. Shorty Stevens made the baptistry, but he made it too small because he was real small. That's why he was called Shorty. He was the first one to be baptized there, but many times we'd have people baptized, but the furnace didn't work, so we had cold water. It also flooded over because people were bigger than the tub, and we had a flood in the first row. I was baptized there about 1956. Okay, my parents came here. My dad was a World War II veteran. I have to skip part of this, but we were raised in St. John's before we moved out here. He heard of Harry Middleton and had this Martin Village, and all the people that came out here were mainly from World War II vets. Harry Middleton was from Russia. He came here. He saw a real gold mine out here to build homes. He had 20 apartments, 30 banks. He was just he just was an entrepreneur. He named every street in Martin Village after his family. And there were 3 styles of homes here. They weren't as nice as McLean. But he bought all this area here for 200 homes, and that's why the McLean Village, he couldn't buy these homes because Middleman bought him out, because across the street they went bankrupt. Marlene Schmitzer was his granddaughter, and that's how Marlene Village got its name. And the Middleman Jewish Center in Portland was named after his wife after she passed away. He had many lawsuits because Marlene Village always flooded every winter. This is 133rd. I took this picture, I think, when I was in college or when I got married. But the house that the street that Bob Walker lived on also flooded, and the rowboats were used to get to those homes. He was sued 5 times. That's me in the bottom picture. I love Hopalong Cassidy. That's our home in the upper left. We had no furniture and no curtains, and you can see we have Venetian blinds there. And I don't know, Dan, how do you make a Venetian blind? You poke him in the eye. Okay, I started in May 7th, 1950, and my mother took me up there to my first, and she kept everything. That's my first coloring. You can see the date in the bottom. I went to the kindergarten, I went to the daily vacation Bible school, I went to Sunday school. Everybody went to these things. We had contests to get people there. Maybe some of you remember this. There were many parades here. Every June and July we had a parade to get people to come here. Cal Ludeman found out that I played the accordion when I was 10 years old. He wanted me to play my accordion for Sunday services, so he had me play my accordion for the Christmas service. And I said, I only know 2 songs. I know It Came Upon a Midnight Clear and Bear Barrel Polka. Which one do you want? This was my second mother, besides my mother. She raised me at the church, Bonnie Troutner. 5 years ago at the 70th anniversary, I went to Vancouver and interviewed her, along with 50 other people I interviewed. And I got to see her for the first time since I was at Sunset Valley. Okay, this is Cal and Vi Ludeman. I'm not going to be able to finish this. I can see, we used to call Val, his wife, her first name Six. We used to call her Six. You can figure it out. Roman numerals. 6. Okay. He called his right hand Johnny because it was cut off in an accident, and he called it, and we would never shake his hand because we were afraid to death. Here's all the things that he formed at the church. During this time, I was a 10-year-old, and I won a contest to go to Silver Creek Falls, and that's where I was saved. And I remember the song that we sang when I was saved that night around the campfire was page 354, the song He Lives. I remember that to this very day as I was 10 years old. I had perfect attendance for 14 years. There were a few things that went wrong during Cal. People got together in people's homes and had secret meetings because Cal didn't want you to dance. He didn't believe in smoking, didn't believe in makeup, and you couldn't play cards. So there's been some highs and lows in the 74 years I've been here, but we've all worked it out. This is how everything looked. Really nice, huh? Nice looking little church. We had many things going on here. My mom was one of the church officers. Bob Walker's mother's in here. Don King's mother's in that picture. Now this is my mother, second from the right, along with Bonnie Bruckert. This is me on the far right. My mom never let me go to church without a tie on. Now I want you to notice something real quick back there. I got to show you. Cars parked on the front lawn, and they also parked in the cemetery. We didn't know it was a cemetery for a long time until it was cleared out. Oh, wait a minute, sorry. Penny, are you still here? This is Penny. Penny's mother.
That's my mom on the right.
Ruth Imlaw is the upper right. That's Ruth Imlaw, Penny's mother. I want to make sure that you saw that. Now here's a picture of Bob Walker, second from the right. That's Bob Walker, second from the right, and my brother, fourth from the right. These are all the classes we had in this day. There's Don King on the far left. I'm going to go real rapidly. We had 1 million events here. 1 million. Vacation Bible School was unbelievable. That's my family at our home. We had the second home in Marlene Village. We bought it next to the one that was displayed. Here's Murray Road before it was, this is the year I think it was actually paved. This is our youth group. And we had all the high schools, there were only 2 high schools at that time here. And we would meet at Bob's house in the basement. We had all kinds of activities we did. Ron Daly and Bob Luther are 2 of the most influential people in my life, the 5 people that meant the most to me in my entire life. Ron Daly, I just love that guy. We also had this guy on the left that I think I asked to come to youth group. I think he graduated from Sunset, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay, good job.
Same time you did.
Say it was right. Here's the new church being built. Almost done, folks. Here's our finished building. On the far right, you can see my family on the right. I finally found them, but it was with Bob Luther and Pastor Jensen, it was always filled. This guy played his trombone as an interim pastor. Bonnie and I were asked by Pastor Jensen to begin Alpha Teens. And I think that's Tom Gray. Tom Gray was hired at a tremendous salary to be our youth pastor. And Bob Schwartz was our new one. So I'll close here. I want to thank Tom and this kid here for helping me set this all up and all you being here.
Yes, he's coming soon. The Son of David is coming soon. Yes, he's coming soon. Yes, he's coming soon. Yes, he's coming soon. Yeshua.